Look at the title on the screen. In the earliest cities, we are talking about Harappan Civilization, and I want you to pay close attention to the word cities, plural, and the word earliest, because nearly 5,000 years ago, while much of the world was living in small villages, the people of the Indus Valley were living in meticulously planned urban centers with underground drainage, standardized weights, and international trade networks. This is not just history, this is a marvel of human engineering. Let's uncover it together. Now, every great story has a beginning, and the story of Harappan civilization begins with a colossal blunder. This slide tells us how a lost city was found. About 150 years ago, in the mid 19th century, the British were laying railway lines across the Punjab region, what is now Pakistan. Engineers were looking for material to raise the track bed to create a solid foundation for the rails. They stumbled upon a massive mound near a village called Harappa. And what did they see? Bricks, thousands upon thousands of perfectly good, ready made, high quality baked bricks. Here is the tragedy of the slide. They did not see an ancient city, they saw a quarry. They mistook one of the oldest cities in the subcontinent for a convenient source of ballast. They write up those 4,700 year old bricks and cushioned them under velvet racks. Entire sections of buildings were completely destroyed. Imagine the loss. It wasn't until about 80 years ago, the early 20th century, that trained archaeologists from the Archaeological Survey of India came back to this site. They dug down and they realized the terrible mistake. This wasn't a random pile of dirt, it was the remains of an incredibly sophisticated urban center. Because this site, Harappa, was the first one properly identified and studied. Archaeologists decided to name the entire culture after it. Every city similar to this discovered later from the same period we call Harappan. And the age. These cities developed about 4,700 years ago. They are among the oldest planned cities in the entire world, standing shoulder to shoulder with the civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. And the key lesson at the bottom of the slide: preserving old buildings helps us understand our history. If those engineers had just looked a little closer, we might know so much more. So once archaeologists started digging properly, what did they find? They found a blueprint, a master plan. This slide explains the standard layout of almost every major Harappan city. They were divided into two sections. Look at the screen. On the west side, we have the Citadel. This part is smaller in area but built on a higher platform of mud brick. It was surrounded by massive walls of baked brick. Why? For protection, certainly, but also to separate the seat of power from the common populace. This is where the special buildings were constructed. We will talk about the Great Bath and granaries in a moment, but this was the administrative and possibly the religious heart of the city. This is where the rulers and the elite conducted their business. Now shift your gaze to the east. This is the lower town. It is larger in area but built on a lower ground. It was also surrounded by walls, but instead of grand public buildings, this is where the people lived. And look at the details of these houses. They were often 1 or 2 stories high, built with rooms arranged around a central courtyard. That courtyard was the heart of the home, letting in light and air. a place for cooking and family activities. Most homes had a separate bathing area, and crucially, wells were located either inside the house or very nearby. And the streets, they had covered drains running along them. This is the neighborhood where the craft person, merchants, the potters, and the farmers lived. This two-part division, Citadel and Lower Town, is the signature of Harappan urban planning. Let's zoom in on some of those special buildings on the Citadel. This slide highlights the engineering marvels of the Harappans. First and most famously, the Great Bath of Mohenjo-daro. Imagine a large rectangular swimming pool, but not for fun, for ritual. This was a large public tank built on the citadel, lined with carefully fitted big bricks. But here is the stroke of genius. They coated it with a thick layer of plaster and then applied a layer of natural tar to make it absolutely watertight. This is extraordinary engineering for 2500 years before Christ era. There were steps leading down from two sides, and rooms surrounded the bath on all sides. Water was brought in from a well and drained out completely when needed. This was likely used on special, perhaps religious occasions by the most important people in the city. Second, we have evidence of fire altars at sites like Kalibangan and Lothal. These are raised platforms where fire rituals and possibly sacrifices were performed. This tells us that organized religion involving fire worship was a part of their civic life. Third, storehouses, massive, elaborate buildings found at Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and Lothal. These were used to store surplus grain, raw materials, and trade goods. The existence of such a large storehouses tells us two things. First, that agriculture produced a huge surplus, and second, that there was a highly organized administration to collect, manage, and protect that surplus. And finally, the brick walls. Look closely at the construction. The bricks were laid in an interlocking pattern. This is a technique that makes walls remarkably strong and able to withstand the pressure of time. The fact that these walls are still standing after 4,700 years is a testament to their advanced knowledge of constructions. Now, if the citadel shows us their power, the lower town shows us their civic sense. This slide is titled A Well Planned Urban System, and it is perhaps the most impressive aspect of the entire civilization. Look at the note at the top. Houses, drains, and streets were planned and built at the same time, the world's earliest known urban planning. This is the world's earliest known example of master plan. They didn't just build a house and then figure out where the water goes later. They laid out the entire grid first. Let's look at the houses. As we mentioned, one or two storage rooms around a courtyard, but note the privacy aspect. Doors and windows opened onto side lanes, not the main streets. This is a deliberate design choice for security and privacy. You don't want dust and noise from the main thoroughfare blowing straight into your living room. Now, the drainage system. This is what separates the Harappan city from a medieval European city thousands of years later. Covered drains ran along every street. These drains had a gentle slope so that water would flow naturally by gravity. No pumps needed. The drains from individual houses connected to these street drains. Smaller drains fed into larger main drains, just like our modern sewer system. And look at this detail. Inspection holes were placed at intervals. Why? So city workers could open them up and clean out any blockages. They had a municipal sanitation department in 2500 BCE, and the streets themselves were laid out in a grid pattern, straight lines. Main streets were wide and crossed each other at perfect right angles. They were carefully aligned with drains alongside them. We have even evidence of deep ruts in the roads from the wheels of cars. This level of safe organization, clean water in, dirty water out, straight roads, is something we take for granted today, but it was revolutionary in the ancient world. So, we have seen the buildings and the streets, but who walked those streets? Who lived behind those courtyard walls? This slide populates the city for us. A Harappan city was a bustling, diverse community. At the top, we have the rulers. We don't know if they were kings, priests, or a council of elders, but someone was planning those special buildings and sending traders to distant lands. They controlled the storehouses and purchased the finest objects of gold and silver. Then there were the craftspersons. These were the makers. They worked in their homes or in specific workshops, creating the beads, the pottery, the metal tools, and the cloth that the city needed. Both men and women were involved in this production. In the countryside surrounding the city lived the farmers and herders. They were the backbone of the economy. They grew the wheat, barley, pulses, and rice. They reared the cattle, sheep, and goats that fed the city dwellers. Without their surplus, the craftsperson and rulers would have starved. A very special group mentioned here are the scribes. These were people who knew how to write. They prepared the seals and probably kept records of trade and administration. Their script is the earliest known in the subcontinent, though it remains stubbornly undisputed to this day. We know they existed because we find their writing, but we cannot yet read their words. Then we have the traders. These were the adventurers who traveled to distant lands by land across the mountains or by sea along the coast to bring back the raw materials we will discuss shortly: copper, gold, tin, and precious stones. And finally, let us not forget the children. We know they played because archaeologists have found wonderful little terracotta toys, tiny carts with wheels, little animal figures, and whistles. History is not just about grand buildings, it's also about the laughter of a child playing with a clay ball. This side is a catalog of Harappan ingenuity. It lists the materials they mastered and the objects they created. Look at the range of materials: stone, shell, copper, bronze, gold, silver, terracotta, and fans. Let's focus on few standout items. The beads. These were made from a beautiful red carnelian stone, from shell, or from a shiny artificial material called fans. Making a carnelian bead was not easy. You had to cut the stone, shape it, polish it to a high shine, and then, with immense skill, drill a tiny hole through the center without shattering the stone. This shows extreme specialization. Stone blades. They made long, precise blades for cutting. Their stoneworking techniques were so advanced that even today we marvel at the sharpness and regularity of these tools. Pottery. They produced vast quantities of red pottery and decorated it with beautiful black designs. This was both functional for storing grain and water and decorative. Cloth. Actually, pieces of cotton cloth have been found sticking to metal objects at Mohenjo-daro, and archaeologists have found spindle wheels, weights used for spinning thread. This confirms that they were weaving their own cotton textiles. Stone weights. This is critical for understanding their economy. They used carefully shaped cubes of a stone called chert as weights. And here is the amazing part. These weights are remarkably uniform across hundreds of kilometers. This means they had a standardized system of weights and measures essential for fair trade. And the seals. These are perhaps the most iconic Harappan objects, small rectangular pieces of stone, usually steatite, with beautiful carvings of animals, bulls, elephants, rhinoceros, and a mysterious unicorn-like creature. And above the animals, we see a line of their script. These seals were used to stamp goods like a trademark or quality control stamps. They represent administration, trade, and art all rolled into one tiny object. Now, where did all those materials come from? A brick you can make from local mud, but copper, gold, precious stones. This slide reveals the incredible reach of Harappan trade networks. A raw material is a natural substance that gets processed into a finished good. Look at the table on the screen. Copper came from present-day Rajasthan, but also astonishingly from Oman in West Asia. That means they were crossing the Arabian Sea. Tin, which is mixed with copper to make the stronger metal bronze, had to come from far away, present-day Afghanistan and Iran. Gold likely came from as far south as present-day Karnataka. Precious stones like lapis lazuli came from Afghanistan and carnelian, and agate came from Gujarat. Shells come from the sea coast, used for making beautiful bangles and ornaments. This slide shows us that the Harappans were not isolated. They were part of a vast, interconnected web of trade that stretched from the Arabian Sea to Central Asia. They were sending out finished goods, probably cotton clothes, beads, and carved shell, and bringing back the raw materials they needed. This required boats, caravans, and a sophisticated understanding of geography and logistics. All these craft persons and traders living in the city who was growing the food. This slide answers that question. The Harappans cultivated a wide variety of crops: wheat, barley, pulses, peas, rice, sesame, linseed, and mustard. How did they farm? They used the plough. We know this because archaeologists have found terracotta toy models of ploughs. The real ones were made of wood and have rotted away. But the toys tells us the technology existed. They turn the soil before planting, which is much more efficient than just scratching the surface. Irrigation was essential. This region does not receive heavy, reliable rainfall like some other parts of India. They had to store water and channel it to their fields during the dry seasons and protect their crops. And what about animals? They reared cattle, goats, sheep, and buffalo. During the cooler months, there was enough water and pasture near the cities. But in the dry, scorching summers, they had to take their large herds to distant areas where grass and water could still be found. They also supplemented their diet by collecting wild bear fruits, catching fish from the rivers, and hunting antelope. The farmers of the countryside were the silent partners in the successes of Harappan cities. Mohenjo-daro and Harappa get most of the attention. Let's travel down to the modern day Gujarat and look at two unique side cities that break the mold. This slide highlights Dholvira and Lothal. First, Dholvira, located in the harsh salt desert of Rann of Kutch on an island called Khadir Bet. Despite the arid surroundings, these islands had a fresh water and fertile soil. What makes Dholvira unique? Look at the slide. It was divided into three parts, not two. Each part was surrounded by massive stone walls with impressive gateways. And here is something truly special: a large open area for public ceremonies, perhaps the earliest known public square in the subcontinent. The most exciting find at Dholvira is the discovery of large letters of the Harappan script carved in white stone, which were probably once inlaid in a wooden board. This is a monumental inscription. Unlike the tiny writing on seals, it suggests that Dolvira was a major center of literacy and public display. Second, Lothal, located near the Gulf of Khambat. The city stood beside a tributary of the Sabramti River. It was perfectly situated near sources of semi-precious stones. Lothal was a major craft center, especially for bead making. Archaeologists found a workshop with half-made bead tools and finished beads. But the crown jewels of Lothal is its massive dockyard. This was a large brick-lined basin connected to the river, designed to allow boats coming from the sea to dock, load, and unload goods. This is the earliest known artificial dockyard in the world. They found a storehouse nearby with many seals and shellings, clay impressions of the seals used on packages. Lothal was a busy, bustling port connecting the Indus hinterland to the wider maritime world. Now we come to the sad, mysterious final chapter of this story. Around 3,900 years ago, something happened. The great Harappan cities began to decline. Look at the signs of decline listed on the slide. At Mohenjo-daro and other sites, we see evidence of a slow decay. People stopped living in many parts of the cities. The sophisticated writings, seals, and standardized weights fell out of use. Those long distance raw materials we talked about, they become rare. Most tellingly, the civic civilization broke down. Garbage piled up on the streets. Imagine that happening in a city with such a proud drainage system. The drains stopped working, and new houses were smaller, shoddier, and sometimes even built over the old streets, encroaching on public space. The discipline was gone. So what happened? No certainty. We are dealing with a mystery, but we have some possible causes. Perhaps the rivers like the Gagar Hakra dried up, reducing the water supply and ruining agriculture. Perhaps centuries of baking billions of millions of bricks and smelting copper led to deforestation, stripping the land bare. Perhaps organizing by huge herds of cattle destroyed the green cover. There may have been destructive floods in some areas, or perhaps the rulers simply lost control. The crucial point is that there is no single explanation that covers all the cities. The Harappan civilization didn't collapse overnight in a fury apocalypse. It seems to have faded away. Its people likely moving eastward and southward, blending into other cultures, taking their knowledge of farming and crafts with them. The cities were abandoned, swallowed by the soil, and forgotten for nearly 4,000 years. And now let's bring our journey through the earliest cities to a close with this quick revision summary. This is the skeleton of chapter. Memorize it. 1. Harappa was discovered about 150 years ago. Sadly, many bricks were removed by railway engineers before archaeologists realized its true importance. 2. Harappan cities, dating back 4,700 years, were divided into Citadel, west higher for rulers, and lower town, east larger for common people. 3. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-daro is the world's earliest known public water tank, made watertight with natural tar. 4. Houses had courtyards, bathing areas, and private wells. Covered drains connected every home to street drains, showing advanced urban sanitation. 5. Crafts included beads, stone weights, seals, copper, bronze tools, cloth, fans, objects, and painted pottery. 6. Raw materials came from distant lands. Copper from Rajasthan, Oman, tin from Afghanistan, gold from Karnataka, precious stones from Gujarat. 7. Seals were used in trade to certify goods. The Harappan script remains undeciphered to this day. 8. Dholvira had three parts and a large public ceremonial ground. Lothal had a massive dockyard and a bead making workshop. 9. Decline began around 3,900 years ago due to possible causes like rivers drying up, deforestation, overgrazing, or floods. Thank you for your attention. The story of the Harappans reminds us that progress is not a straight line. Civilization rise, they dazzle us with their brilliance, and sometimes they quietly fade away, leaving behind only whispers in the dust for us to find.